Hi, I'm Jeremy, and today we're going to take a look at the 17th game in my series on the German Game of the Year, or Spiel des Jahres winners. And this is the 2009 winner, Dominion. And this is a game that probably doesn't need much of an introduction. It was designed by Donald X. Vaccarino, and it plays from 2 to 4 players in about 30 minutes for ages 8 and up. And this is certainly one of the most significant games, I would say, to have won the Spiel des Jahres. It essentially invented a genre of game called the deck building genre, in which players are going to be starting with a small deck of cards and using those cards to acquire more cards that they'll shuffle into their deck, eventually building up the powers of that deck over the course of the game, with the ultimate goal to collect points. Many games have, since this came out back in, I think, 2008, have copied this game, or iterated on it would be a kinder way to put it. But this is definitely the big watershed moment for this kind of mechanism. So I'm going to take a minute to show you how it plays. Most of you probably already know how it plays, but then I'll come back and I'll give you my thoughts on it. A game of Dominion will start with each player getting a handful of 7 cards, 3 of which will be estate cards and 7 of which will be copper cards. They'll each shuffle those cards. And then you will lay out a certain configuration of cards, which does vary slightly based upon players. You'll set out a set of these copper, silver, and gold cards. These will be your currency cards, and then also your victory point cards. And the number of cards of these in each deck will be dependent upon the number of players. Finally, you'll also set out a number of curse cards, which may be used in some games, and again, that will be dependent upon the number of players. Players will shuffle their cards in their deck, and then draw 5 on their turn. So, on your turn, you're going to draw 5 cards, and then you'll be able to play these cards to perform actions, and then buys, and then a cleanup phase. So that's how each turn is going to work. Since I have no action cards, I could move directly to the buy phase, and what I could do is I could use these 3 cards, which each have a value of 1, to buy a card from the display here. And there's going to be 10 different cards set out each time you play, so there's going to be a lot of variation in this game, and with the expansions there'll be even more. So I have 3 money to spend, so I could buy a card costing up to 3. And each one of these cards will have different actions and abilities. So for example, this Chancellor card, it costs 3. The cost is always labeled in the lower left corner. It tells you here it's an action, so you'll be able to play it as your action. And then it tells you what it does here. So it gives you +2 money as if you were buying, and it allows you to immediately put your deck into your discard pile. This allows you just to basically cycle through your cards more quickly. So I could buy that, then I'll discard all the cards. These estates are just victory points. They don't do anything for me in my hand, but I need them in order to win the game. I've spent these 3 money, and I bought this card. I'll discard those, and I'll draw back up to 5 for my next turn. So the other players would go, and then when it came back to me, I would have these 5 cards in my hand. Now I could buy another card, because again, I still don't have any action. Maybe I'll buy this Gardens card, and you can see that this is a victory point card, much like these estates, except this one is worth 1 victory point for every 10 cards in your deck, rounded down. So the number, as I build up my deck, that will become more valuable. So I would discard those. Now I have no cards to draw from my draw pile, so what I'll do is I'll reshuffle the cards, which will be the 10 cards now that I've had, plus the 2 that I've bought in the last 2 turns. And these will now be put into circulation and possibly will come up into my hand. So for the next turn, I will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these cards here, which now you can see that Gardens card that I've bought has now come up and is in circulation. So over the course of the game, you're going to be buying cards. So for example, on my next turn, I might choose to spend these 4 money, and you can only buy 1 card per turn unless you have an ability that allows you to buy more than 1. To buy this silver card, and you can see the silver card is worth 2 coins per card. So if you have this in your hand, since your hand limit is always 5, this gives you more potential buying power. So that would be my turn. Then I would draw again, and you can see how quick your turns potentially are in this game. Although in some circumstances, the game can take a little longer to take a turn. So now I have my Chancellor, which is +2 money, so I could play him as my action. If I wanted to, I could immediately put my deck into my discard pile. I probably would choose to do that. So these other 2 cards would just get discarded. And then I have 2 money, plus this is 3 money. These are, again, not going to be worth anything to buy, so I could buy another card. And I might buy another silver. So as you can see, essentially over the course of the game, the cards that you have will keep getting more and more powerful, enabling you to buy more and more things. The ultimate goal of the game is essentially to buy victory point cards, and you can see these 3 victory points cards cost respectively 2 and 5 for 3 points, or 8 for 6 points. And by acquiring those and having those in your deck, you will be the winner. So a lot of the game strategy is essentially figuring out when to switch over from buying these cards to buying those cards. So now on this turn, for example, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 money, so I might choose to buy this card that costs 5, and this would let me do a +1 card, so it's an action card. When I would play this, I would get 1 additional card, so I draw another card. I would get 1 additional action, so I could play another action card. I would get 1 additional buy, which would mean I could buy up to 2 cards, and I would get 1 additional money to spend. So this just shows you how the cards get more powerful as you will acquire them. There are some other cards in the game, so some of them are attack cards. So for example, this one here, it's a thief, and each player will reveal the top 2 cards of their deck, and if they get it, reveal any treasure cards, they'll throw one out that you choose. So this is just a way to basically deplete players' money, and then you have the option to steal them. So that's an attack card, but there are cards such as this one here as a reaction card, which would block you from an attack if you showed this from your hand. And just these cards will basically work together in different ways over the, every time that you play, there'll be a separate set of cards out, which basically gives you a new strategy required each game to be the most efficient, to collect the most points by the time these piles run out. The game will conclude when either the supply of these province cards is completely empty, or when any 3 other piles run out. So any 3 supply piles at all, or just specifically the province piles. Then at that point, every player will simply go through their hand and look for any victory point cards and tally up the number of victory points that they have, and the player with the most will be the winner. Alright, so that is Dominion. So I'm not sure exactly what there is to say about this game. I think it's been one of the most impactful releases in the board gaming hobby over the last 2 decades. Certainly, if not on quite on the level of Catan, one of the biggest impact Spiel de Jahres winners besides Catan. It is a game that essentially not only brought new players into the hobby, certainly a lot of Magic the Gathering players and players of other card games such as that became board gamers after they saw this game come out. But it also, created many imitators ever since then. There are plenty of deck building games now on the market, and deck building is just, commonly thought of as a board gaming mechanism, and this is the game to thank for that. And what I'll say about the game is that I think that it does deck building pretty much better than any other deck building game that's come since. It's essentially has really been thoughtfully designed. A lot of those rules that are in there just are worked to make the game as streamlined as possible. This game, it did win the Spiel de Jahres, and that's a Family Game of the Year award. It's intended for relatively low to medium complexity games. And the jury has actually said that, had this game come out today, it would have won the Kenner Spiel de Jahres, which is an award that they've began giving partially because of this game's complexity, the next year. And they've just said that, certain families bought Dominion. They found that was a little, too convoluted with all the card combinations that were possible, and gave up on it. And they didn't want to repeat that, so they created basically a next step up award, and that's the Kenner Spiel de Jahres. And Dominion is a large part of the reason why that happened. At the same time, to anybody who would be likely to play a deck building game, this is relatively simple. Like, this is a game that's very approachable. If you have somebody explaining the game to you, you'll be able to pick it up within a turn or two. Yet at the same time, it's incredibly deep, especially not just because of what comes in this box, but because there are at least 10 different large expansions to this game that will add cards. And every time you throw a new card into the mix, you change the possibilities. People have likened this game to a puzzle where each time you have to figure out the most efficient way to collect points before your opponents do. And that's going to be based on the array of cards that you have to buy at the start of the game. So just the game is always ever changing, and that's, I think, a lot of its appeal, and that explains, I think, why it's been so endearing and popular. again, other games have come to imitate this, but personally, this is probably my favorite deck builder, and I think it will likely remain so for the foreseeable future, just because to me it plays as a very streamlined game. Like the game, it says on the box 30 minutes, and that's about right. If you're playing with people who are able to make relatively quick decisions, there's no problem whatsoever cranking a game of this out in a half an hour, no matter what cards are in the mix. So ultimately, this is a game that I think I'm happy that the Spiel des Jahres jury picked. It was up against some tough competition. I believe Pandemic was the same year, and that's a game that's really had legs ever since it was nominated for the award. But I think they absolutely made the right choice in this, both in terms of essentially innovating in the game sphere, and that's one of their criteria for the award, but then also in having a major impact on the hobby and bringing more people into it. This game has done a lot to do that. So I'll leave it at that. This is a game that many people love for good reason, and that is Dominion.